Hello, perceptive readers. I'll try to be as concise as possible with this. I want to remind you beforehand, and this will fall more into the James Powatry consultant moment, is that one, you try your best to meet people where they're at. Okay, you try your best to do that. And two, I want you to realize that each of us, especially when we pursue our background, especially our spiritual journey takes us on a path. Different people that went different ways. Whereas, my path has led me towards still the two greatest commandments. And with that, there are certain conscious decisions now that I have taken upon my life that I may not engage in certain practices, or I don't engage in certain practices that I did at one time. But that doesn't mean the knowledge that has come about in those practices or what have you still isn't at times necessary to relate. And yes, in some ways, it still can actually be used in another area that's along the spiritual note as far as the God in heaven, which will not go into that scope on this one, but this is something that I want to relate because I talked about agendas. Okay, I talked about agendas and I talked about how important they are, that normally when people print out agendas, what will be at this meeting or that meeting, they are given, this, see, I'm actually just taken for granted that they are given the necessary bullet points of exactly what is requested, what they will be questioned about, especially important subjects, especially public hearings and things of that nature. So when you go there with that agenda, you're already prepared for what you're going to report on. You see, and it's important, again, for the persons involved, the chairman and stuff like that, that they stick to not only the time limit, but also what the talking points are. So you're not supposed to all of a sudden go out of left field and talking about something that was not already clearly stated on the agenda in the paper that was even sent to the ones that were involved. Okay. So I want to make that clear. I saw, again, a hearing, and it actually still dealt with very high-ranking officials. Okay, very high-ranking officials you see even in the military. And I think I told you this before. No, I know I told you this, that yes, over the years, I realized I've said some stuff at times, and I admit, I didn't always know that the person may have had decades over me. And I told you before that there's just a certain age or what have you, that I really don't like to speak a certain way to certain ones in a certain age bracket. And I know some people disagree with my feeling on that, because they still feel like, no, if you feel the idea was idiotic, then you can say it's idiotic. You can say it's stupid. You can say that. And granted, I just say there's just a certain way that you will want to comport yourself. And that's one reason why I told you about letter writing, because I do feel like with that at times, sometimes you could at least put it in a palatable and respectful manner of this person's dignity. But I know you don't always get that. And see, we talk about a side note of what we still need to work on. Everybody know I still need to work on that, because stuff still fly out my mouth at times. But it's still not, I tell you what, I know I be on my P's and Q's at times when it's someone in a very respectful or dignified position. So with that being said, see, there was this hearing, so to speak, this committee meeting, and it was asking about actually, some planes, okay, some planes, and the cost of the planes, and it was more focusing in on as far as what do you do if one of these planes are broken down or shot down. I think shot down may have been even the term that was used, knocked out of the sky or what have you. And so, remember, I don't have the agenda. I don't know what was already said, whether that question was put there on the general, I'll put that on the agenda for all those high ranking officials, about 3 or 4 of them. It may have been more, who knows? Uh, Very high ranking, were, supposed to respond to the question. And the person who had the floor at the time, whether it was a senator or it was actually a woman in this position of authority, that kept asking the questions on how would these different planes be fixed? Where would they go to? You see what I'm saying? In order to keep them functional, repair parts or spare engines or what have you. And the more that, she actually asked these questions, you see, each time when the camera was looking at these high ranking officials, they had to basically, in a sense, keep uh, almost like I'm unable to answer that question look. And, the cameras are not always favorable, when you're in that type of situation, where if you can't, reply in a fast manner or what have you, then the cameras can make you almost look like that you're ignorant or what have you, and dumbfounded. I just want to tell you that's the way it was making these high officials look. Okay, now this is what I want to state about the way budgets and things of that nature work. You see, sometimes you see when the civilians, because whether you believe it or not, in a sense, where that's the way it's supposed to be, the civilians, you see, senators, etc., what have you, that's why, you have a president that's really a civilian or what have you, are the ones that still, in a sense, really run the military. I know that's going to have some people be like, oh, but see, no, I want to tell you the way it's at least supposed to be organized and legislated in that way. Without going into too much detail, because that's still going beyond the scope of what I really want to talk about on this. Basically, okay, when they would have their meetings, budget times and stuff like that every year, or I think they actually plan several years out or what have you. See, even several years out for the military. And that sometimes coincide with commander changes of bases and things of that nature. And so there are decisions that are made sometimes way ahead of time, and you just can't know exactly the way this is going to go or that is going to go or what have you. And I'm just telling you the mentality, especially of some of the high-ranking officials at times. I'm just telling you this. It's almost like, look, we're for the defense and we're for the offensive. We're a war machine or what have you. We're not concerned so much as if something really get, shot down over sea or land or what have you. So I'm just telling you that's the mentality of things of that nature and all. And as far as just regular maintenance, then almost on every type of military installation, and when it comes to even ships, from what I understand, the ships, boy, they got their own top-notch maintenance crew, spare parts, etc., or what they may deem sufficient or what have you, to just, if a plane limps its way back onto the ship or what have you, then most likely they'll find a way to get it somewhat fixed or what have you. But otherwise, the other stuff of just breaking down over land and stuff like that, it's almost like that is not normally a high priority. And so it could have changed. You see what I'm saying? But what I am telling you, and see, that just reminds me of when they cleared out, was it the bases in Afghanistan? That all those Humvees, all that other, and some of that stuff was just brand new equipment, trucks, Humvees, etc., helicopters apparently or whatever. See, all that stuff was just left at that base. So that goes to show you what the mentality is. And you can think back to the administration that did that, and I think it was Afghanistan. It could have been somewhere else. But see, now I still want to go right back to the whole point of budget time. See, that's the emphasis. See, you can actually have some commanders, base commanders, etc., that had already been the ones that had gave the approval 2, 3, 4 years beforehand with and I'm not saying this happened in this case, I'm just giving you some information that could have already had the approval given to these civilians and contractors and what have you. And so when they came to them and say, well, what do you need to accomplish the mission in this case? And yes, the high-ranking military commanders that was in charge at this time saying, well, we need several hundred of this just to get this job done. Now, anything extra of that, where you start talking about extra engines and extra parts and stuff like that, well, depending on the climate of the time, it might be like, look, we don't have all that for the budget. So you got to either pick this either or. And most likely, many persons would just say, you know what? We'll just go with the numbers and hope we got the skilled, you see, which in this case, they'll be saying with confidence, we got the skilled pilots, etc., to get out of this equipment the usage what we need to get done. So all that extra maintenance stuff or what have you is not always given the consideration that it needs, at least in the budget. Now, I'm telling you all this because, one, I told you, I don't know what the agenda was or what have you, whether these persons actually already got beforehand what they were going to be asked. What I can at least tell you is, some of the ones that may be before these boards and stuff like that now may not have even been the ones that was making the decisions that were made 2, 3, 4 years before. And what they would just have to do when their time comes up then to put in their so-called budgets or what have you, then guess what? Then that's what they do. And see, I just gave you this background because, one, the way that they were spoken to, though, I'm just going to say, I feel strongly it was a better way of just going ahead and relate the information or what have you. And I say again, that's if the information was already in the agenda, and that these high-ranking ones were supposed to know, okay, because it was in the agenda for them to be prepared. If it wasn't in the agenda and this person started coming out of way left field, changing the narrative and everything else, that's wrong. Because in that case, this person had another agenda in themselves just to make these high-ranking men who should have been respected to look dumb, and they not. And that's all I'm going to say.